Welcome again to our panelists and to audience members. I'm very excited about this panel, which is titled The Hunt for the Missing: Enforced Disappearances in Punjab by the Indian State. We have 5 speakers and a short video in between, so we've got a lot of input for us today. And I will, so we can get right into it, I'll hand right over now to Dalsher Singh Virk.
Hello everyone. So I would like to start the presentation by saying Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. And then I would like to give a brief introduction to the Sikh genocide that lasted from the year 1984 to 1994. So firstly, I would like to honor the thousands of Sikhs, activists, farmers, students, and civilians who fought for the civil liberties but were subjected to disappearances and died at the hands of the India's state-sanctioned violence. So from 1984 to 1994, the Sikh minority in India was subjected to state massacres, mass torture, gang rape, and extrajudicial killings by India, which resulted in what could be termed as the Sikh genocide. This was after a major civil disobedience movement in Punjab, a decade of the largest pro-federalism protests by the Sikh minority of India, and it was guided by the Anandpur Sahib resolution and spearheaded by Sant Jarnail Singh Ji Khalsa Panjamwale from the holy city of Amritsar. Sikhs in India were subjected to high levels of racism, and in 1982, the Sikh government officials, members of parliament, and students were banned from the Asian Games being held in the national capital, Delhi. Army was deployed with sentry guns to keep the protesters in check, and thousands were arrested, beaten up, and publicly humiliated. The media portrayed Sikhs as terrorists rather than civil disobedience activists for showing their warrior saint martial heritage of 300 years. This warrior saint heritage, which was born of compassion, had fought for the freedom of religion for all in India for centuries. Sikhs were also prominent in fighting for the Allies in World War I and II, as well as for the independence of the Indian country. This martial heritage was projected through government propaganda as aggression and a threat to the majority Hindu population, even though Amritsar, the holy Sikh city, remained a hub for social activism, with poor Sikhs and Hindus coming for help. The Indian state-sanctioned violence reached its heights in June 1984, when Amritsar, the sacred hearts of the Sikhs, was attacked and Punjab was militarily occupied by India. Thousands of unarmed Sikhs were massacred. These are some views from the attack on Amritsar 1984. Months after the Amritsar massacre, in November 1984, thousands of Sikhs in Delhi were targeted, massacred, and gang raped by the Indian state-sanctioned mobs in just 3 days, while the police coordinated the attacks and the Indian military did nothing in the state capital. Not one single person of the Hindu majority population suffered harm. Ordinary civilians tried to help their neighbors or to aid them in internal refugee camps, but were paralyzed by the police, racist rumors against Sikhs, and just the sheer organization with which India carried out the killing. They identified Sikh houses through registers, government records. They marked Sikh houses, brought in weapons and killers to then burn Sikhs to death. Thousands of Sikh women were rounded up from the poorest neighborhoods, collected in vehicles, and taken to be gang raped, while over 4,000 Sikhs were burned to death. So these are some views from the Delhi Massacre of 1984. Millions of Sikhs around the world protested the ongoing atrocities in India amidst calls to separate from India and build a new country. During the 10-year civil war that followed the events of 1984, Indian state-sanctioned torture of the Sikhs and mass enforced disappearances of the Sikhs became the norm. At many points, even Article 21 of the Indian Constitution, which is a right to live and to life, was suspended in Punjab, and laws with no accountability, such as the TADA, Terrorist and Disruptive Activities Prevention Act, were introduced. KPS Dillon, a former head of police in Punjab, said that TADA was used on Sikhs alone, with only 3% conviction rates on actual militants. TADA was used on political dissidents and unarmed civilians who were sympathetic to the Sikh struggle. Human rights activists tried to highlight that TADA was being used to crush the Sikh civilian population and dissidents. This resulted in harassments, stigmatization, and the vulnerability to be arrested and tortured if they were still alive and not killed in custody. The coercion and torture that survivor families received was horrendous, and our panel will share some examples. Turbaned religious Sikhs, mainly young men, were targeted, almost akin to a pattern of androcide. They were killing all the young men from age of 15 to 45. Kumar and many other human rights activists were able to prove that the police had a pattern of arresting Sikhs. They would take them to different police stations across the region, but never the local ones, so that the families could not see them. By the time the people had tried to find a way through the maze of legal systems, by selling land to pay lawyers, paying huge bribes to policemen, or through habeas corpus, the family members were almost always missing. The arrested people were tortured, raped, and it was hit and miss if they survived. Some survivors to this day still believe that their loved one is coming home. The murder of Punjab human rights community and its paralysis. We can only estimate the violations of torture and the dead, because during the Civil War, human rights activists were often targeted, randomly murdered, and disappeared by the state. In the last 30 years, impunity has stayed rife, with key heads of torture being promoted into senior roles. The paralysis of the human rights community has only been exacerbated. Facades of various human rights commissions constructed by the state were inept in the least. Now, I would like to share some examples of some human rights activists and other people who played a role in the Sikh struggle. Lawyers like Kulwant Singh, for instance, was killed by the police with his wife and child in 1993 on his way to see a client and her child who were jailed. 5,000 lawyers held a strike to protest it for 2 months and put a petition to the High Court, but the 5-member panel of judges refused to put out even an inquiry for investigation into his murder. Jaswant Singh Khalada, a human rights defender in Punjab, was trying to investigate and document disappearances and paid the price for going against the police. He was abducted and tortured. His findings, later known as the Khalada findings, proved custodial murders and illegal mass cremations. Ram Singh Baling, a journalist, was murdered on June 3, 1992, as he tried to expose the extrajudicial killings in his article, Who Will Unveil the Truth of So-Called Police Encounters. He was also the secretary of Punjab Human Rights Organization. Doctors who tried to treat patients with bullet injuries were killed. Widows also struggled to be heard. Widows like Jagdish Kaur, 35 years later, after the massacre, are still trying to bring perpetrators to the court. Her husband and family members were burned to death by mobs in the Delhi Massacre while the police stood by. She has been personally intimidated by the police and politicians, who she can identify directly, but her plight is not alone. She was only asked in 2004 for her statement by the Indian courts, 20 years after the massacre and after numerous failed commissions. She says, I only received the summons in 2004. I do not know whether any action was taken by the Rangnath Mishra Commission on my affidavit. My memory is good. I had named all the persons who were responsible on November 1 and 2, 1984. Police officers who openly refused to torture or were internal sympathizers of the Sikh struggle risked elimination. Bagicha Singh, for instance, once in the border security force, upon seeing the torture of Sikhs, joined the separatist movement, and his family was tortured. Post the human rights struggle. In 1997, former Justice Kuldeep Singh headed the People's Commission of Punjab. In Chandigarh, they heard for 3 days from thousands of families affected by the extrajudicial killings and torture. Notices were served to the accused police officers, but no one turned up. The High Court banned the People's Commission in around 1997-1998. The judiciary has been complicit in ensuring that cases weren't heard for habeas corpus, while people were alive in custody and even in getting justice for survivor families to this day. The collusion between the judiciary, political parties, intelligence agencies, and the media meant negligible redress for the survivors, rendering the legal systems impotent. After a lot of years, the CCDP, Committee for Coordination on Disappearances in Punjab, was the one point where activists, religious groups, and social elites came together post-conflict. Fueled by their passion, these elites spent several years trying to locate the victims mentioned in the Khalada findings, while taking significant risks, including police threats. However, the CCDP noted on several occasions that the compensation without admission of liability of the Indian state in the Khalada findings is not acceptable, and eventually the CCDP could not continue the struggle for documentation and justice further with impunity. the rise of extremism in India against minorities, the Muslims across India and in Kashmir, as well as the Dalits, continues to this day. Activists from these vulnerable groups are also under the threat, and India is coming under red alerts of a flashpoint for genocide. We hope there are further panels to discuss the threat to minorities across India in the future, as the abuse of power by the Hindutva state and the rise in Hindutva fascism needs further analysis. The use of extremism via media, tech-savvy citizens, means that the rights of minorities in India are often being subverted, and the extent of the rise of fascism within India being underplayed. Punjab still remains a region of impunity, with activists, dissidents, and separatists still facing problems. Now, I would also like to share a few more presentations of the period from 1984 to 1994. Even small children had to suffer from all those atrocities. And Team Taran had also gathered some intel on the people who had suffered at the hands of the government. Now, after me, Jagjit Singh from the Punjab Documentation and Advocacy Group would share his experiences, and will continue further. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dalsha, for that presentation. As you just suggested, we will now hear from Jagdeep Singh Bajwa. You do not have a presentation. That's correct, right? So everyone can just close the presentation by clicking at the top right, of the presentation screen, and then we can just focus on your presentation. Thank you very much.
Hello, Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. The Punjab Documentation and Advocacy Project PDAP began in 2008 with advocates Ghulam Singh Bains, Baljinder Singh Bajwa and Jagjit Singh Bajwa, myself in the Gurdaspur district of Punjab. It was one of the most heavily hit area under the Pul state. We researched the case of thousands of young people who were killed in fake police encounters by the Indian police and Indian security forces over a period of 10 years. The youth were taken from their homes and tortured inhumanly, and they were all Sikhs. The true figures have never been released by the government. There were no complaints from the Indian civil society or from NGOs. There was no desired ability or will by voluntary or government groups of complete the statistics of victims and the deceased, as many feared for their life and potentially police harassment. And to this day, Punjab is genocide of immunity. Our small team of PDAP started work from the villages of constituency Dera Baba Nanak in Gurdaspur. With the limited resources, we started going from village to village to reach out to the families. Whole family members were killed in forces disappearances. We interviewed and interviews with the families for 2 to 3 hours about their loved ones who were killed. We investigate any documents, this several any evidence relating to the missing person, anything the family managed to hold photocopies of newspaper article on the fake police encounter, illegal detained by the Punjab police or Indian security forces was so common that families only had photocopies to remind them of their missing loved one. They had telegrams or letter what they did written to the governor or chief minister of the Punjab. Due to the small size of the team, the work was very slow, with constant dangers from police harassment. Our own family members were also killed and tortured during the civil war. Two of your uncle killed by the Punjab police in a fake encounter at Firozpur 1993. In 2010, our father had several police cases put on him under the Unlawful Activity Act, and as a result, my brother and myself, the main PDAP searcher, had to stay away from our home for about 6 months. Our research was stopped when my father was rearrested in 2013 and sentenced again. This impacted our work. Initially, PDAP jobs was only collect data on the thousands of youngsters who had been killed, but stories were told by the families of tortured Desford and other families who were murdered. We found the more cases of unidentified bodies disposed by police were unaccounted for than the original Jaswant Singh Khalra. Investigation from three cremation grounds, Durgiana Temple, Tarntan, and Patti. Khalra provided 2094 case before he was murdered by police. As cases grew, we can estimate now on the basis of other reason and killings. Around 25,000 young Sikh were killed in fake police encounter all over Punjab. After the murder of the human rights activist Khalda, based on the writ petition filed by his wife Varmjit Kaur Khalda in the Supreme Court, the whole case was handed over to the Central Bureau of Investigation for India to investigate, and to the National Human Rights Commission. Before his death, Khalda highlighted three cremation grounds of illegal mass execution to the Punjab and Haryana High Court. However, the Indian state only acknowledged 70 cases of disappearance out of a list of 2,094 persons, and action was limited to be taken against the police officer, and no senior police officer could ever be prosecuted. Only middle rank officer to the rank of DSP, Divisional Superintendent of Police, the CBI closed 20 of those 70 cases against the police. No senior police officer of the police state could ever be prosecuted. On the order of the Supreme Court, the National Human Rights Commission set up two commissions, but the National Human Rights Commission limited the investigation severely. Instead of investigation how the Sikh citizens were arrested, held in illegal custody, tortured, and then how the encounters were enforced. The NHRC did not do their work as Human Rights Commission. They did not investigations anything. The National Human Rights Commission was complex in the ensuring that the Indian state is not an investigation for legal capture, detained, and enforced disappearance of Sikh civilian population by the state. Instead, most cases of disappeared people were just again a small monetary compensation of the dead person, a two-tier system of for those who were killed. Give 1,500 families. There is still 600 people who were given no compensation despite the legal judiciary acknowledgement of the Khalda finding. Thousands of other disappeared and tortured have never been investigated or legal acknowledgement. This was the genocide of Sikh by the Indian security forces of the so-called large democracy in the world, India. During the CBI investigation, the CBI made sure the public were in fear that all the records has been seized by them. So many families and so did the human rights community that little evidence had survived. However, we started to investigate buying their cremation ground from Khalda's finding. We got last cremation conduct by the Fring district around the original finding. For example, the Municipal Council of Batala in 2014. Between 1988 and 1994 covered 9 police stations under Right to Information Act. PDEP then started collecting such record from all the district of Punjab, even where there were incomplete record of about 14 out of 22 district of Punjab, and also collected about 1700 FIRs, which on reading PDEP got information about 8,257 missing persons. The stories told by the families, the records of the cremation ground, and all the cases from the FIRs and newspaper headlines. These stories generated by the Punjab Police and the Indian security forces provide to be false, after which PDEP had to prove genocide, and we dedicate to take legal action to bring justice to the families of the victim. In April 2017, the Independent People Tribunal, headed by a former retired Supreme Court judge, along with the Supreme Court and High Court lawyers and panel of human rights activists from other states of India, recorded the statement of about 1,000 victim families in Amritsar, and this was later turned into a petition, and PIL was filed in the Supreme Court in September 2019, seeking information about 8,257 missing persons, which the Supreme Court directed to go to the Punjab and Haryana High Court. On November 2019, in Punjab and Haryana High Court, Chandigarh, APIL has been filed by PDEP, which had 2-3 dates, which are still pending due to the epidemic of COVID-19. PDEP visited about 1,700 villages in Gurdaspur district and collecting information about 1,100 missing and person killed in fake police encounter, about 4,000 villages in Amritsar district and some villages in other district of Punjab. As far as the PDEP team could reach about 9,000 killed and missing youth. Statistics have been collected, and these figures, 1/3 of the claims made by Jaswant Singh Khalda. The rest of the work is being continued by the team. Apart from this, PDEP during its inquiry also observed that the cases registered by the CBI as per the order of the Supreme Court following the writ petition of Paramjit Kaur Khalda were also registered against government employees without the approval of the government. On this basis of registration is first stayed in the Punjab and Haryana High Court and then in the Supreme Court for a long period of 13 years till 2017, which was ended due to the effort of PDEP along with other advocates, and following the trial of about 10 cases, about 25 convicted police officers were sentenced of the life imprisonment. Even during these trial, PDEP saw the government openly support these convicted policemen and makes every effort the deceased witness for immediately crossing of the hearing them, and by intimating witness in every possible way by greed or giving jobs. Every effort is made to refrain from testifying, and even in court, no action is taken on respected application by the families of the victim, by the lawyers of PDEP, and the convicted who are convicted are either released by the government, which versus concession or repeat long period, which calls into question the justice system in India, the so-called large democracy. Advocate Jagjit Singh Bajwa, Punjab, and that advocacy project PDEP. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Thank you very much. I'm now going to make Simajit the presenter so that you can share your screen with us.
I'm just going to show a short video for a couple of minutes. I understand there is no volume, but it gives an idea of the survivor voices. I think we'll go straight to the translation to speak with Baljinder Bajwa. Thank you for joining us, Baljinder. Can you hear us? Thank you. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa. Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Okay, ਤੁਸੀਂ mute te aajo and I'll start your discussion. Okay, to summarize, can everybody hear me okay? Paramjeet?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Thank you, Tim. To summarize Baljinder Singh's introduction, I'm going to summarize it a bit so that we save time, because obviously we're speaking with Punjab researchers. So his talk is about the missing cases, going further into them. Baljinder Singh Bajwa is a Punjab disappearances advocacy researcher. So who can express the pain and agony of a child who has never seen their father, never had the privileged joy to know a father's love, but knows that their father was taken from home at night by the police in front of their family while they were asleep. So this is how thousands of children have come to know about their fathers from human rights organization reports of the disappeared. They have no other memory of their fathers. A staggering 25,000 young Sikhs were forcefully captured from their homes. Evidencing of this has become very difficult because of the paralysis of the human rights community. So when I started visiting villages of Punjab in order to research disappearances, I came across varied stories. Sometimes a mother whose four sons had been killed, as well as her husband, a mother whose only teenager son was killed. The combinations were absolutely endless. But the tears of loved ones murdered by their own country, they can melt any stone heart. Survivors have fought for 30 years in search of justice, but all in vain. They've had no money, no community support. They're very poor people on the whole, and they face the wrath of a brutal police force who to this day coerces them, threatens them every time they are trying to put forward their cases into court, and a police force and Indian state that is intent on bribing them. Still, these very, very brave survivors, they continue to struggle to be heard. Many have passed away, but there are still quite a few survivors, and we're going to share a few of the cases. Okay, Hanji, Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Hanji. So Baljinder Singh will now share a few cases amongst the thousands. Hanji Baji.
ਨਿਰਮਲ ਸਿੰਘ ਅਤੇ ਉਸ ਦੀ ਪਤਨੀ ਖੇਤੀਬਾੜੀ ਯੂਨੀਵਰਸਿਟੀ ਲੁਧਿਆਣਾ ਵਿੱਚ ਸਰਵਿਸ ਕਰਦੇ ਸਨ ਅਤੇ ਨਜ਼ਦੀਕ ਹੀ ਰਹਿੰਦੇ ਸਨ। ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਦੋ ਬੱਚੇ ਹਨ।
Nirmal Singh and his wife Balvinder Kaur were both working in Punjab Agricultural University and live nearby with their two small children. Hanji.
ਪਰ ਇੱਕ ਦਿਨ ਅਚਾਨਕ ਪੁਲਿਸ ਆਣ ਪਈ ਤੇ ਨਿਰਮਲ ਸਿੰਘ ਨੂੰ ਉਸ ਦੀ ਪਤਨੀ ਅਤੇ ਬਾਕੀ ਫੈਮਿਲੀ ਨੂੰ ਹਿਰਾਸਤ ਵਿੱਚ ਲੈ ਲਿਆ। ਰੋਂਦੇ ਕਰਲਾਉਂਦੇ 3 ਤੇ 4 ਸਾਲ ਦੇ ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਗਾਜ਼ੀਆਬਾਦ ਦੀ ਟ੍ਰੇਨ ਤੇ ਚੜਾ ਦਿੱਤਾ।
Hanji. One day the police came and captured them without any arrest warrant. They took Nirmal Singh, his wife, and several other families. His crying 3- and 4-year-old children were forced on a train to Ghaziabad, hundreds of miles away. Hanji.
ਜਦੋਂ ਇੱਕ ਸਿੱਖ ਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਲੱਗਾ ਕਿ ਇਹ ਬੱਚੇ ਤਾਂ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਦੇ ਹਨ ਅਤੇ ਉਸਨੇ ਬੱਚੇ ਦਾਦਾ ਦਾਦੀ ਕੋਲ ਪਹੁੰਚਾਏ। ਹਾਂਜੀ।
The Sikh there realized that they were children from Punjab and the grandparents were eventually reunited with the children. Hanji.
ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦਿਨਾਂ ਦੀਆਂ ਅਖਬਾਰਾਂ ਵਿੱਚ ਮਨੁੱਖੀ ਅਧਿਕਾਰ ਜਥੇਬੰਦੀਆਂ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਨਿਰਮਲ ਸਿੰਘ ਤੇ ਸਾਰਾ ਪਰਿਵਾਰ ਨੂੰ ਪੁਲਿਸ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਚੁੱਕੇ ਜਾਣ ਅਤੇ ਝੂਠੇ ਪੁਲਿਸ ਮੁਕਾਬਲੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਮਾਰਨ ਦੀਆਂ ਖਬਰਾਂ ਵੀ ਆਉਂਦੀਆਂ ਰਹੀਆਂ ਹਨ।
The disappearance of Nirmal Singh's families was a famous case. It was reported in human rights reports and newspapers across the country. Hanji.
ਨਿਰਮਲ ਸਿੰਘ ਦੇ ਸਾਰੇ ਪਰਿਵਾਰ ਅਤੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ 3 ਮਹੀਨੇ ਦੀ ਲੜਕੀ ਸਮੇਤ ਲਾਪਤਾ ਹਨ ਅਤੇ ਮੌਤ ਦੇ ਸਰਟੀਫਿਕੇਟ ਵੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਮਿਲੇ।
Nirmal Singh's families, along with their 3-month-old daughter who are still missing to this day, are not assumed dead in India in 30 years and their death certificates still unavailable. Hanji.
ਮਾਤਾ ਲਖਬੀਰ ਕੌਰ ਆਪਣੇ ਪੁੱਤਰ ਬਲਵਿੰਦਰ ਸਿੰਘ ਨਾਲ ਬੱਸ ਰਾਹੀਂ ਜਾ ਰਹੀ ਸੀ ਕਿ ਬੱਸ ਅੱਡਾ ਤਲਵੰਡੀ ਰਾਮਾ ਵਿਖੇ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਤੋਂ ਨਾਕਾ ਲਾਈ ਖੜੀ ਡੇਰਾ ਬਾਬਾ ਨਾਨਕ ਦੀ ਪੁਲਿਸ ਨੇ ਬੱਸ ਰੋਕ ਕੇ ਬਲਵਿੰਦਰ ਸਿੰਘ ਕੋਲ ਪਹੁੰਚ ਕੇ ਉਸ ਨੂੰ ਨਾਂ ਤੇ ਪਿੰਡ ਪੁੱਛਿਆ। ਹਾਂਜੀ।
Mother Lakhbir Kaur and her only son Balwinder Singh were travelling back home when the bus was stopped at a police blockade near bus stand Talwandi Rama. The police unit of Dera Baba Nanak started searching the passengers and the police questioned him on his name and where he was from. Hanji.
ਉਸਨੇ ਜਦੋਂ ਆਪਣਾ ਨਾਮ ਬਲਵਿੰਦਰ ਸਿੰਘ ਅਤੇ ਪਿੰਡ ਲਾਵਲਪੁਰ ਕਲਾਨੌਰ ਦੱਸਿਆ ਤਾਂ ਉਸ ਨੂੰ ਬੱਸ ਵਿੱਚੋਂ ਹਿਰਾਸਤ ਵਿੱਚ ਲੈ ਲਿਆ ਅਤੇ ਬਲਵਿੰਦਰ ਸਿੰਘ ਲਾਵਲਪੁਰ ਸ੍ਰੀ ਹਰਗੋਬਿੰਦਪੁਰ ਦੇ ਭੁਲੇਖੇ ਮਾਰ ਦਿੱਤਾ।
Told them the truth that he was from village Alawalpur and said, "I am Balwinder Singh." He was taken off the bus. He insisted that his village was Alawalpur in Kalanor and not from Sri Hargobindpur. But because the police were searching for a suspect with the same name, Balwinder Singh from Sri Hargobindpur, Balwinder Singh was killed by them. Hanji.
ਇਨਸਾਫ ਲੈਣ ਲਈ ਮਾਤਾ ਨੇ ਦੋਸ਼ੀ ਪੁਲਿਸ ਅਫਸਰਾਂ ਦੇ ਕੋਰਟ ਵਿੱਚ ਕੇਸ ਕੀਤਾ। 29 ਸਾਲ ਦੀ ਕਾਨੂੰਨੀ ਲੜਾਈ ਦੌਰਾਨ ਪੁਲਿਸ ਨੇ ਮਾਤਾ ਨੂੰ ਕਈ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੇ ਕੇਸ ਵਾਪਸ ਲੈਣ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਡਰਾਵੇ, ਧਮਕੀਆਂ ਅਤੇ ਲਾਲਚ ਦਿੱਤੇ।
Seeking justice, Balwinder's mother fought a 29-year-long battle against the police officers. She was threatened, abused, coerced, offered bribes, but the brave lady could not be threatened or stopped. Hanji.
ਪਰ ਮਾਤਾ ਨਾ ਧਮਕੀਆਂ ਤੋਂ ਡਰੀ ਅਤੇ ਨਾ ਹੀ ਕਿਸੇ ਲਾਲਚ ਵਿੱਚ ਆਈ, ਪਰ ਲੰਮੀ ਕਾਨੂੰਨੀ ਲੜਾਈ ਲੜਦੇ ਹੋਏ ਬਿਨਾਂ ਇਨਸਾਫ ਤੋਂ ਗੁਰੂ ਚਰਨਾਂ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਾ ਬਰਾਜੀ ਤੇ ਕੇਸ ਅਜੇ ਵੀ ਪੈਂਡਿੰਗ ਹੈ।
Despite her bravery, she died never seeing justice done for her son's murder as the case is still pending. Hanji.
ਬੀਬੀ ਅਮਰੀਕ ਕੌਰ ਦੇ ਪਤੀ ਜਸਬੀਰ ਸਿੰਘ ਨੂੰ ਪੁਲਿਸ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਕਈ ਵਾਰ ਫੜ ਕੇ ਤਸ਼ੱਦਦ ਕੀਤਾ ਗਿਆ ਸੀ। ਬਾਰ-ਬਾਰ ਪੁਲਿਸ ਦੀ ਕੁੱਟ ਤੋਂ ਤੰਗ ਹੋ ਕੇ ਉਹ ਰਿਪੋਸ਼ ਹੋ ਗਿਆ।
Amritsar Kaur's husband, Jasbir Singh, was tortured by the police many times, taken, and he went underground. Hanji.
ਪੁਲਿਸ ਨੇ ਜਸਬੀਰ ਸਿੰਘ, ਅਮਰੀਕ ਕੌਰ, ਰਤਨ ਸਿੰਘ 7-8 ਹੋਰ ਨੌਜਵਾਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਗ੍ਰਿਫਤਾਰ ਕਰਕੇ ਥਾਣੇ ਲੈ ਗਈ। ਅਮਰੀਕ ਕੌਰ ਦੇ ਸਾਹਮਣੇ ਜਸਬੀਰ ਸਿੰਘ, ਰਤਨ ਸਿੰਘ ਨੂੰ ਤਸ਼ੱਦਦ ਕੀਤਾ।
On the 29th of June 1991, the police took Jasbir Singh, Amrit Kaur, Ratan Singh and 7 to 8 other young people. Amrit Kaur witnessed her husband's torture. The legs of Jasbir Singh and Ratan Singh were torn apart. Hanji.
ਗੁਪਤਾਂ ਤੇ ਬਿਜਲੀ ਦੇ ਕਰੰਟ ਲਾਏ, ਚੱਡੇ ਪਾੜੇ, ਘੋੜਨੇ ਲਾਏ। ਅਮਰੀਕ ਕੌਰ ਦੇ ਵਾਲਾਂ ਤੋਂ ਖਿੱਚਿਆ। ਦੂਸਰੇ ਟਾਰਚਰ ਵਿੱਚ ਵੀ ਸੇਮ ਟਾਰਚਰ ਕੀਤਾ। ਜਸਬੀਰ ਸਿੰਘ, ਰਤਨ ਸਿੰਘ ਨੂੰ ਝੂਠੇ ਪੁਲਿਸ ਮੁਕਾਬਲੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਮਾਰ ਦਿੱਤਾ।
Brutally tortured, heavy wooden boulders were used to crush the legs and electrocuted. Her hair was dragged with machinery. They were all re-tortured in another torture centre. Her husband, Jasbir Singh and Ratan Singh, were killed in fake encounters in village Dalwandi Virk, Hanji.
ਗਰਮੇਸ਼ ਸਿੰਘ ਦੀ ਉਮਰ 3 ਸਾਲ ਅਤੇ ਉਸ ਦੀ ਭੈਣ ਦੀ ਉਮਰ 2 ਸਾਲ ਸੀ ਜਦੋਂ ਉਸ ਦੇ ਪਿਤਾ ਰਤਨ ਸਿੰਘ ਨੂੰ ਪੁਲਿਸ ਨੇ ਮਾਰ ਦਿੱਤਾ।
Gurmesh Singh was just 3 years old and his sister 2 when their father Ratan Singh was captured and killed. Hanji.
ਬਾਪੂ ਰਿਆਮ ਸਿੰਘ ਨੇ ਆਪਣੇ ਪੁੱਤਰ ਨੂੰ ਮਾਰਨ ਵਾਲੇ ਪੁਲਿਸ ਅਧਿਕਾਰੀਆਂ ਤੇ ਕੋਰਟ ਵਿੱਚ ਕੇਸ ਕਰ ਦਿੱਤਾ।
Their grandfather Varyam Singh raised the 2 toddlers. He started legal proceedings in the law courts of his son's murder. Hanji.
ਪੁਲਿਸ ਉਸ ਦੀ ਪਤਨੀ ਨੂੰ ਡਰਾਉਂਦੀ ਸੀ ਜਿਸ ਕਰਕੇ ਉਸਨੇ ਰੀਮੈਰਿਜ ਕਰ ਲਈ। ਹਰ ਇੱਕ ਬੰਦਾ ਡਰਦਾ ਸੀ ਕਿ ਅਸੀਂ ਉਸਦੇ ਬੱਚੇ ਨਹੀਂ ਸਾਂਭਣੇ।
The police harassed the entire family, and the little toddler Gurmej's mother was forced to remarry and abandon her children. Everyone feared the police in those days, so even taking care of a dead man's children meant the police would harass you, Hanji.
ਫਿਰ ਬਾਪੂ ਵਰਿਆਮ ਸਿੰਘ ਨੂੰ ਕਦੀ ਪੁਲਿਸ ਨੇ ਫੜ ਕੇ ਬੀਕੋ ਬਟਾਲਾ ਕੇ ਲੈ ਜਾਣਾ ਅਤੇ ਕਦੀ ਕਿਤੇ ਹੋਰ। ਛੋਟੇ ਛੋਟੇ ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਨੇ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਦੇ ਘਰਾਂ ਤੋਂ ਮੰਗ ਕੇ ਰੋਟੀ ਖਾਣੀ।
Grandfather Varyam Singh was taken into custody randomly, subjected to third-degree torture in Biko Batala, other places, and the kids begged for food. And this is while his son has been killed and he's trying to put legal cases. The police tried to bribe him to stop the legal case, but he never gave up until he died. Gurmej Singh now helps in PDAP research, but his grandfather died, never seeing justice. Hanji, thank you.
ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ।
Vaiguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaiguru Ji Ki Fateh. Thank you, Baljinder Singh Ji. Okay, Timothy, shall I just, Tim, shall I try and share the video again for 2 minutes
Yes.
or not?
Yes, let's try that.
What do I click? I don't.
So at the bottom left, bottom right, I think, there should be a possibility to share your screen.
Share an external video or upload a presentation?
Then that's not the options I was aware of, but then use the external video and then put in the link.
Oh, thank you.
It's frustrating because you should have the same options that you had when we tested
Apologies.
it earlier. No, this is not your fault. This is.
I'm quite. Not that.
It's
Oh,
working.
there we are. So we got it. Thank you.
And we have sound as well.
Oh, marvelous. I'm going to flick through the presentation beginning so that, because it's available on YouTube anyway, we've gone through the history. So these are the survivor widows that the Dharan Project got to interview, and the Punjab Disappearance Project are also have interviewed a lot of survivors. Some of our survivors have overlapped, just for the record, and some have not. But again, because of the region of impunity and the difficulties 30 years later, it's quite hard to actually get the data together that hasn't already been lost or the forensics lost. Thank you. So I will begin my talk. Do I just finish the presentation, Tim? Sorry.
Yeah, if you could stop sharing it, I'm not sure. Yes, perfect. And if you'd like to put your camera on, we'll also be able to see you.
So thank you so much for everyone's patience. This panel has come together, and they are activists who obviously are facing a region of impunity as we speak. And there are cases being put against lawyers as they're trying to still put cases for survivors, and I'm sure we all appreciate that. I'm just going to now read briefly my talk as swiftly as possible. So I am going to speak about being buried alive under impunity, narratives of torture survivors from the Punjab. We honor the countless survivors and those who were disappeared. I can never forget Seva Singh, an elder, putting his tortured hand on my head to bless me. His wife and sons had been killed, and he'd suffered indescribable torture. The second you encounter survivors as a researcher in the field, you cannot go on seeing the world in the same way. And now the voices of survivors outweigh a noisy world for me, as I realize these voices drown out very fast. We began Project Dharan in 2002 to help torture survivors in the Punjab with an open door policy, some savings, a promise not to invade people's spirit of survival. We were so moved by the stories that we just couldn't leave without helping them. We were the first medical project for widow survivors, as Justice A.S. Bance, PHRO, kindly recognized. Based subconsciously on social libertarian principles and seek spiritual practice to try to serve anonymously and practically. Our goal was to stay as practical as possible in the field. Impunity meant that our project could be closed down at any point, and we had to be able to leave survivors with a spirit of their own survivorship, which they'd obviously had based on their own resilience. So we couldn't really sort of invade their lives and then turn around the following week and say, sorry, we can't help you. Now, the problem with working in impunity is that you can be stopped at any time, as I've said, but you can't openly advertise either. To this day, if you had around 30 to 40 elderly widow survivors whose sons were killed, who have spent the last 30 years suffering torture and surviving, you actually cannot even help them openly without having surveillance agencies swarming gatherings, commemorations of the dead. So no Indian civic system, governmental or international agencies even attempted to help Punjab's torture survivors. The report Eyes Wide Shut, Torture in the Punjab, Physicians for Human Rights, Denmark, highlighted the third-degree brutal torture used by the Indian state on unarmed Sikhs. Dr. Ayaka Pino, one of the authors, guided me on how to mobilize medical help without experts in country, and I'm indebted to Dr. Ayaka Pino, Harshinder Singh Muxer, and CCDP, the Narayan Singh community leader, who helped us find thousands of cases that went beyond the Kalra findings. It was important to go beyond the Kalra findings because the Kalra findings are the only point that the Indian state accept as their role in killing people. But as we've seen, that's had limitations as well. Brave medics like Dr. G.P. Singh, Dr. Tajinder Singh, and activists like Jaginder Singh really tried to push open help amidst this barbed wire of impunity. So after 10 years, we had to close medical rehabilitation for torture survivors due to debts, indifference of the community, engulfing needs of survivors, and we felt quite defeated. We'd reached a few thousand with pockets of impact. But the small consolation was to hear the UN Women's Head commenting in a forum that our project was a gigantic task, considering the country of India needed to facilitate this recovery for survivors. But it is little consolation, and I do stress this, that so many have been still let down in the field. Many survivor families whose loved ones disappeared were often torture survivors themselves, and this has been overlooked. Torture survivors whose families were untouched. These are cases of people whose families were killed and they suffered torture themselves. Survivors have faced stigmatization as terrorist families for decades. Once TADA was used on a suspect, their family would be harassed. Even 30 years later, they're accused. And the police come round to ask, where is the missing person? Some poor illiterate people actually raise their hope, hoping that the police will come round to help them, but they haven't. Widow survivors faced forced displacement, repeated homelessness for up to 8 years in cases with no shelter due to fear. India has never enabled an official humanitarian route into the region, and it has let survivors down severely, as we shared with UN Women Vrindavan through Dr. Giri. Survivor testimonials show that they suffered vicarious trauma, such as being forced to watch others being tortured, killed, suffering electric shocks, being beaten or facing abduction. Victims were also often subjected to forced nakedness, and as Scott Allen has noted, medical evidence shows that forced nudity in imprisonment is comparable sometimes to rape because it carries that implicit threat of rape and mutilation. This has scarred survivors, and rape has been under-researched. Male rape was common in interrogation centers using batons and objects. The narratives of heroism of survivors has really become acceptable to the community narratives and continue to dominate. A survivor shares that my daughter was tortured badly, she was hung, and so was I. We were later thrown in Firozpur Central Jail once TADA was put on us. But my sister and daughter were taken by the police, raped, tortured, and it was senseless. H. Kaur was tortured and raped in front of her father. He was tortured in front of her. They were accused of feeding militants, even though they were held at gunpoint, and she suffers agoraphobia to this day. A survivor shares, my daughter said that if we must die in this genocide, we will die fighting for our people. Jaswinder Kaur was just a 12th grader, 16 years old. We were alone at home. We knew my son would be killed by them. My daughter went to the top of the house and started throwing bricks at the bastard police. When she rushed down, she was shot at by the police. And forever, Jaswinder Kaur went to Guru Gobind Singh Ji's mother, Mother Gujri's arms forever. Paramjit Kaur says that my head was pushed into water, my arms and legs were torn, My eyes had chilies put in them. I couldn't breathe. I was in Bikkiwin torture chamber for 15 days. 10 policemen would stand on each of my legs. They ordered my execution. I was let go, ordered to run, so they could shoot me in a fake encounter. Paramjit Kaur says, but I told them I don't have the strength to run. You've destroyed me. How can I actually run? So she said, I just stood there and said, kill me if you're going to. Jaswant Kaur's 3 sons were all killed doing charity work at the Gurdwara with Baba Charan Singh Garseva. Baba Charan Singh's 4 brothers were also killed by police. So survivors have experienced extreme mental torture, witnessing execution, confinement, mock executions, as well as watching loved ones be tortured has resulted in trauma, chronic depression, somatization. Anxiety attacks are very common, as survivors soon learned that they had to be ready to run as soon as there is a knock at the door. Preeto Kaur shared, I was tortured by the Indian police. The back of my head was hit. I was beaten in front of my son, Babul Singh, who was hanging by his arms, twisted. His shoulders were broken. He was tortured to death in front of me. And they said, where is your Bindranwale now? A mother said, my 16-year-old son, Baljinder, tried to tell me of the terrible torture he went through, how he was beaten up again and again. Different groups tried to free him. Baljinder would tell me, mother, let me join the fighters. I kept saying, son, you haven't done anything wrong. And it hurts me to this day that I became my own son's enemy. I kept telling him not to fight. Eventually, he was tortured to death. Only when searching questions have been asked from the victim's testimony does it emerge where the actual survivor children were, because they tend to get eclipsed through a lot of testimonials. So children, as we know, were imprisoned after the Amritsar massacre. Chattopadhyay, a social worker, tried legally to challenge the Indian legal system and ask why small children were being arrested and tortured from a massacre site post-massacre. Kulvinder Kaur says that they take the entire family and torture them. Harbal Singh was just 12 years old when they took him. No one knew where he was for 8 to 10 days. Survivor children whose fathers remain unknown have not been helped, not by the community, not by anyone. Their deaths were never acknowledged, even in commemorations. The continuing denial of the state in providing death certificates of their fathers, their mothers, have been denied basic widows' rights, and this affects them to this day. And from our studies, over 48% of survivor families face another generation of dire poverty. A mother shares that after 17 years, when the cholera investigations restarted, I was asked to identify the police station head and bodyguards. Sister, after my young child is abducted and goes missing for 17 years, how would I be able to identify the perpetrators? So the police closed the case. My son wasn't part of any militant group or political group. Another case was of Devinder, who was 16 years old when the Amritsar massacre took place. She survived, her family died. Later, she married, but in 1992, Devinder, who was 6 months pregnant, and her 1-year-old toddler were taken by Punjab police in Gurdaspur, and she was never seen alive again, along with her husbands and brothers. The toddler survived. H. Kaur, a torture survivor, is around 80. She lost 9 members of her family. Another widow shares that from when he was a little boy, I saw Sukhdev until he was about 25. Sukhdev was tortured so badly in Sariali police station. I tried to get him medicines, but the police wouldn't let me near him. A widow shares, I begged the police, let me make a cup of tea. I thought it would buy time. And the police ignored my cries and dragged my husband away before my eyes. And there's a lot of stories where parents try to get to their loved one in the police station, and then they were threatened with death themselves. A mother shares, they tortured Balvinder Singh Billa, my son, a great deal. Even after torturing, the children would be released, but they never let Billa go after torturing him. Sometimes the police had him for 20 days at a time. They tortured Billa so much. During the Civil War, butcher doctors used to underreport injuries or simply finish off people that had been brutally tortured, as PHRO highlighted. Postmortems of victims were often carried out by unskilled physicians, or tailor-made forensic reports were created for the police, as Judge T.S. Cheema from the Punjab Human Rights Commission and Mr. Danewali, former Inspector of State Police, shared. Finally, Lakhbir Kaur shares, it's been 23 years since he died. We have seen a lot of troubles, but I really can't even share it anymore. What we witnessed through the Taran project was the spirit of survivors it was so indomitable. Despite suffering terrible levels of torture, as Dr. Amy Law discovered years ago, the use of their spiritual heritage from Sikh history seems to have helped them challenge this third-degree brutal torture. And this area is an area of interest for further research. Finally, I would just like to raise another area which could be an interest of in terms of a peace project for the Punjab, and that is to look at the also not just the survivor narrative, but also look at the dissident narrative. So the criminalizing of political separatists of Khalistan in India from 1984 continues to this day. This area is very important to understand the potential for peace in the region. During the Civil War, peaceful dissidents like Dr. Gurnam Singh Bhuttar, a young student, tried to mobilize peaceful political support for Khalistan, but he was brutally tortured to death. Dissidents historically even gained power as MPs elected from jail during the Civil War, like Maan, Bimla Kaur Khalsa, who became MPs for the Khalistan dissidency, but they still faced harassment. Now, post-conflict, there's been continuing patterns of criminalizing dissidents. There's been a worldwide commitment by various political groups of the Khalistan process to stick to the political process in the last 30 years. 20 years. India continues, however, to propagandize security threats, and the lack of political voice and the lack of political space for Khalistan, the actual genocide denial that India has gone into, the impunity and the lack of Indian state action for survivors, as well as stopping attacks on Sikhs and Sikh holy places, threatens future peace as well. Human Rights Watch condemned the use of torture in Barapin's case, as his extradition was from the USA to India on the basis of no torture. Barapin had just stood in in a political seat in the Punjab in the SGBC as a voice of dissidency when he was arrested and tortured. The torture methods still involve third-degree torture, direct traumatization and religious burning of religious symbols, turban, ganga, the sacred comb, stripping the person naked, burning pictures of Bindramwale. The criminalization of dissidents as they try to engage in social community issues really needs to be researched further. Because when what has been noticeable are patterns of when they're trying to raise a voice, say, on the exploitation of farmers. In 2005, Bittu, Barapin and Azad, who are known dissidents, were arrested and tortured. The arrest and torture of Sikh youth is also a very worrying factor, because they are trying to raise their voice against state-sanctioned religious violations, or their outrage against Hindutva RSS fascists who have openly used racist rhetoric or genocide denial claims, impunity, the lack of justice for survivors, and all of this becomes a melting pot for a lot of criminalization that the Sikh youth in Punjab face. You rarely have incidents, and I stand to be corrected, of RSS Hindutva fascists who have incited violence or used racist rhetoric actually being arrested, let alone prosecuted. And this is highlighted in the film Out Justice too. Sikhs as a minority don't benefit from a power of expression in how their religious symbols are being used. For instance, you had Rajnath Singh, Defence Minister, using the Sikh flag at the border for the Sikh Regiment of India. But when you have a young person who puts the Sikh flag on the Red Fort being a symbol of political power in Delhi at the time of the recent farmers' protests, this is seen as a seditious act of treason, and he was threatened with torture. This area needs further research, because, as Justice Ban said, it is not peace that you see in the Punjab, it is the silence of mass graves. We request, finally, your solidarity in bringing a Truth and Reconciliation Commission to the Punjab and to The Hague, if possible, and to Barcelona. A widows' tribunal to the West with survivors who are still alive while time is on our side. Please do join our voice in trying to get justice for these enforced disappearances. Many thanks.
Thank you so much. We have our final presentation now by Paranjit Singh Ghazi.
Yeah, thank you. So first of all, I'm thankful to International Association of Genocide Scholars for holding this session. My presentation will focus on basic issues concerning Indian legal system with regard to genocide and crime against humanity, and the study of Sikh genocide, taking a broader view of genocide as an attempt to destroy the roots of a community or a nation. So let me put it very clearly that under Indian legal system, genocide and crime against humanity as such are not crimes, simply because there is no statute defining and punishing either genocide or crime against humanity. India's reasoning for not enacting a law defining and punishing the crime of genocide is that acts amounting to genocide are already punishable under Indian Penal Code. This position is absurd, however, as the physical acts of violence committed in the process of genocide are crimes under the legal systems of all countries. The recognition of genocide as a specific crime reflects the international consensus that genocide is a unique crime, often referred as crime of crimes. The result of India's refusal to enact such a law is that genocide and crime against humanity are not even investigated under the Indian legal system, let alone tried or punished. To conclude this point with regard to this vast lacuna in Indian legal system, I would say that impunity for genocide and crime against humanity is embedded within the Indian legal system, given the absence of any law dealing with these crimes. The cases related to Sikh genocide in India present a clear example of this impunity. Recently, a bench of Delhi High Court observed that neither crimes against humanity nor genocide are part of Indian domestic law of crimes. The court said that the loophole needs to be addressed urgently. The court passed this observation while announcing its verdict in a case in which an Indian politician named Sajjan Kumar, who was a leader of the then ruling Congress party, was facing a trial related to Sultanpuri massacre in Delhi. This particular massacre was part of a series of massacres that occurred throughout India, targeting the Sikh community in November 1984. When we study the Sikh genocide in India from the perspective of genocide as a crime under international law, it comes out that this case involves multiple aspects which require scholarly attention. The crime of Sikh genocide was spread over a period of time, mainly from 1984 to 1993, involving a series of massacres in 1984. And then through a series of coordinated, organized and systematic acts, including but not limited to enforced disappearances, fake encounter killings, custodial torture and killings, extrajudicial killings, and mass secret cremations. This coordinated violence falls under the physical destruction aspect of genocide and has been covered in detail by my co-panelists. If we try to determine involvement of state apparatus in genocide, we find that in case of Sikh genocide, the government machinery, political parties, the ideological groups, ideological influencers, police, paramilitary, and even army were all involved at different times to varying levels and degrees. The approach of Indian state, including the political, administrative, and judicial organs towards this genocide or crimes committed against this tiny but still largely visible community of Sikhs also offer a unique field of study for genocide scholars. The behavior of Indian society towards this genocide is another field of study which requires scholarly attention. Now I would like to discuss aspects of the Sikh genocide which encourage scholars to transcend the narrow terms of today's legal definition of genocide by taking a broader phenomenon into account. We know that genocide in general terms is defined as a coordinated plan of different actions aiming at destruction of essential foundations of life of a national group. Many coordinated acts aiming the destruction of essential foundations of life national groups are not covered under the legal definition of or legal definition which we have in present day. But those are covered, indeed covered as a part of a genocidal phenomena. The study of Sikh genocide from these aspects especially can offer great help in understanding the phenomena of genocide in general or around the world, with a special focus on cultural genocide aspect. Let me share a brief background which may be helpful for understanding Sikh genocide from this perspective. Sikhs had suffered huge losses during partition of 1947 in terms of casualties, displacements, loss of historical places, but they had emerged as a powerful socio-political group in India. Sikhs asserted their political identity as they had their own political and social institutions. Being a community of faith, it was hard for aspiring Indian state to assimilate Sikhs. If we see other hand, India was dependent on Sikhs in many aspects, such as India was dependent on Sikhs for its food security, with the Sikh homeland Punjab feeding the entire country despite having less than 2% of geographical area. Sikh regiments in Indian Army had a vital place in terms of India's external defense. In economic sphere, Sikhs held an important role in India as they were exceptionally controlling the transport sector. And then Sikhs had a quite good share in wholesale market of many industrial commodities in India. By effectively mobilizing opposition to assert their own political autonomy and opposing India's internal emergency in 1970s, Sikhs had challenged the centralizing forces of Indian state. Thus, the Indian state's genocidal plan against the Sikhs was a kind of final solution for the Sikh problem. Now I shall try to touch upon certain aspects related to the Sikh genocide, which may or may not fall within the legal definition of genocide today, but should be covered in the study of genocide as a broader phenomenon. Faith is one of the foundational stones of a nation or a community, particularly in case of a religious community or nation like Sikhs. Attacks on physical centers of Sikh faith called Gurdwaras was carried out in 1984. Firstly in June by Indian armed forces, including the Indian Army, and then in November 1984 by mobs led by political leaders and backed by the state's administration and police force. A recent book released last month has unearthed the fact that Indian Army had invaded at least 65 Sikh Gurdwaras in Punjab and adjoining states during June 1984. And then there is a project which is still ongoing. Initial investigation of that project has revealed that more than 300 Sikh Gurdwaras were attacked in November 1984 in India, in national capital Delhi and elsewhere. Historical records, cultural heritage, and sacred relics are yet another route of life for a community. In the case of Sikh genocide, it is a known fact that Indian Army destroyed the Sikh reference library, which was earlier called as the Sikh National Library, that was located within the precincts of Shri Harmandir Sahib, one of the central places of the Sikh faith. The library was holding numerous rare records and artifacts, including handwritten documents of the Sikh Gurus, that is, the founders of Sikh faith. The destruction of Sikh reference library is important from the perspective of phenomenon of liberticide also. These direct attacks and destruction of cultural heritage illustrates an intent to physically destroy a specific group while also contributing to their cultural destruction. Historical memories are yet another route of life for a community. Indian state left no stone unturned to vanish the historical memories of Sikhs, as it erased all signs of destruction and damage caused by Indian army or other Indian forces to various Sikh gurdwaras or places of historical, cultural and spiritual importance for the Sikhs in Punjab and adjoining states during their attack in June 1984. Though the Indian state has not physically destroyed all social and political institutions of the Sikhs, they have destroyed their character by coercively enforcing the state's control over the remaining Sikh institutions. The study of Indian control over the Sikh political and Sikh political and social institutions could offer valuable inputs for understanding the phenomenon of genocide in terms of destructions of the root of a life of a targeted community. Rafi Lemkin had pointed that the genocide happens in two phases: destruction of national pattern of the oppressed group and the imposition of national pattern of the oppressor. If we bring in Naomi Klein's shock doctrine, we can envision how this happens. After physical persecution, when the targeted group or community is in shock, the preparators of genocide tries to enforce their national pattern on the targeted group. The study of Sikh genocide from this aspect can help understand it in a better way, especially with regard to practical aspects related to this process. Let me share an example with you. The Sikhs in India faced coordinated state violence and state-sponsored genocide from mid-1980s to early 1990s. In 1993, the Indian state introduced its policy of cultural invasion in the Sikh homeland of Punjab using police force. Police forces who were meant to maintain law and order forced its newly formed cultural wing upon the people and started holding so-called cultural events. Village representatives, we call them sarpanch or panchayat, or we can say village heads or elected village councils. They were forced to hold these cultural events by Punjab police. Those who refused to do so were tortured in public. This policy was implemented at a large level in Sikh majority state of Punjab in India to erase the Sikh culture and identity. Police promoted artists who were encouraging use of intoxicants, and years later, a large number of a younger generation in Punjab was in drug abuse. Most of them were, the research has shown this, that most of them were under the influence of culture promoted by the state. India's exploitative policies have also resulted in an extreme drainage of Punjab's natural resources. The allocation of Punjab's river water to non-riparian states has forced Punjab to depend on groundwater. The result is that 80% of Punjab's rural development blocks are overexploited in terms of extraction of groundwater. And then there are studies, government's own studies, which say that groundwater would vanish from Punjab in next 15 years. The Indian state has used its economic powers, including that of trade and commerce, to ensure that the state of Punjab is forced to produce crops which are required by India to fulfill its needs. Though it was clear that such a crop pattern would bring Punjab, the home state of Sikhs, to the brink of vast ecological and environmental crisis. And we are going through this crisis right now. These aspects, if studied from the perspective of destruction of essential foundations of life of a targeted group, could offer better understanding of genocide as a larger phenomena. There are various other aspects also, such as India's attempt to destroy the economic root of Sikhs, the role of economic subjugation of Punjab in the migration and forced displacement of Sikh youth population from Punjab, policies targeting younger generation of Sikhs in Punjab, which I shall not elaborate here due to shortage of time. If any student of genocide studies or any scholar linked to International Association of Genocide Scholars is interested in exploring or studying various aspects of Sikh genocide, I shall all possible help. And if there are any questions or queries, I'm happy to offer or answer that. Thanks.
Thank you very much for this insightful presentation. Thank you very much to everyone for your interesting and insightful presentations. We now have about 12 minutes left for questions. I would maybe encourage the presenters to turn on their videos, and then we can engage in a debate. I would suggest that if you have a question, just type your name into the chat, and then you can present the question through audio, and then you don't need to type so much, as we're a relatively small group. We have a comment by Henry, outgoing president of IAGS, who thanks for the invitation to collaborate and wonders whether you'd be consider joining the IAGS Curriculum Development Working Group. And that would be a good way maybe for collaboration going forward. Okay. Oh, Simajit, we can't hear you. You're muted.
Thank you so much. We would really be honoured to join the Curriculum Development Group as a cohort. Thank you.
So while some of the other audience members are maybe thinking of some questions, maybe I'll launch off with the first question to get us going. This conference is the larger theme that some of the panels has, and that's overarching, is digital approaches to genocide studies. And so I wonder whether in your advocacy and in the approaches to countering impunity, what role digital media maybe play? Has the advent of digital technologies meant that there are different ways of creating awareness of fighting impunity, and how the digital era is maybe impacting that?
I would like to answer this question. First of all, digital era is really relevant because as our PDEP friends, they are doing ground search, and they usually need to study or check newspapers or periodicals of that time that have been digitalized by various Sikh organizations now. So they could easily use that digitalized version of previous information to identify and match their details so as to which is very helpful in their preparation. And in terms of awareness also, this is important. But as we are in a state of impunity, or we are in a region that is still under the control of Indian state, we are facing problem that they are blocking access, especially in India, to our portals. Like 3 of websites of a news organization that I run, they are blocked in India since last June. And recently, on 4th of this month, they blocked access to our Facebook page. So then I know that there are many YouTube videos that are not accessible in India. And then PDEP people, they were to show a documentary, but they were hesitant to show that because they are facing a ongoing investigation for screening a documentary based on Punjab disappearances in Punjab. So there is opportunity in digital media, but we are facing many challenges that are unique in a way that government do not issue notice. They just block access to your websites, and then they register cases, criminal cases against them, and then they keep investigation open And the result is that we were not able to see a portion of PDAP documentary due to that. Initially, it was our plan to show that documentary, some part of that in this panel, but we were not able to, as there is an ongoing investigation, and these activists, they had apprehension that they could face some serious consequences if we show that documentary here.
Yeah, the problem, I think there's great scope in terms of digital media in keeping alive what has happened to survivors. So now we are seeing a lot of children of survivors coming forward and telling the whole history of what happened to their families and that disappeared. But so there's an awareness around 1984. But as Paranjit has said, and the PDAP group have found as well, and all of us have found, is that there is a counter narrative going, a very, very organized, extremist, I would say, a narrative that's countering everything. Every time Sikhs try to raise the voice of 1984, they're accused of being terrorists. So the whole violence of the Civil War is unfortunately the dominating narrative around what has actually happened to survivors and the disappeared and victims. And I think it was Helen Fine. I'm not very well read, but as you guys all are IX, but I think she said we basically, our victims have a problem that they get buried under the Civil War itself. And then so we face that, and Indian citizens are very tech savvy. So they tend to be, because they're quite unaware of what's happened in 30 years, they're not, so they tend to play into that narrative. That's all I wanted to share. So Apaji Baljinder Singh, Jagjit Singh, ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਕੁਛ ਲੱਗਦਾ ਕਿ digital media ਦਾ ਕੋਈ ਫਾਇਦਾ ਹੋਇਆ ਹੈਗਾ? Digital media ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਕੰਮ ਵਿੱਚ ਕੋਈ ਫਾਇਦਾ ਹੈਗਾ? 84 ਦੀ ਸਟੋਰੀ ਦੱਸਣ ਵਿੱਚ। Unmute ਕਰੋ। Jagjit, ਤੁਸੀਂ muted ਹੈਗੇ। Did you want to share anything, Dilshare? ਤੁਸੀਂ muted ਹੈਗੇ। ਹਾਂਜੀ।
ਮੈਂ ਕਿਹਾ ਜੀ ਵੇਖੋ ਡਿਜੀਟਲ ਮੀਡੀਆ ਦਾ ਫਾਇਦਾ ਤੇ ਹੈਗਾ ਜੇ ਉਹ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਹੁਣ ਅੱਜ ਤੋਂ 30 ਸਾਲ ਪੁਰਾਣੀ ਗੱਲ ਹੈ, ਜਿਹੜੇ ਅੱਜ ਦੀ ਨਿਊ ਜਨਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਆ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਹੀ ਕੁਛ ਨਹੀਂ ਆ, ਉਹ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਤੱਕ ਉਹ ਗੱਲ ਪਹੁੰਚਦੀ ਆ। ਤੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਸਾਰੇ ਲੋਕ ਇਹ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਆ ਕਿ ਇਹ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਮੁੱਦਾ ਵਾ ਇਹਨੂੰ ਲੋਕ ਭੁੱਲ ਚੁੱਕੇ ਆ, ਪਰ ਜਦੋਂ ਡਿਜੀਟਲ ਮੀਡੀਆ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਹਾਈਲਾਈਟ ਕਰਦਾ ਵਾ ਤੇ ਉਹ ਸਾਰੇ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਦੀ ਆਵਾਜ਼ ਬਣਦਾ ਵਾ, ਇਸ ਲਈ ਡਿਜੀਟਲ ਮੀਡੀਆ ਦਾ ਫਾਇਦਾ ਬਹੁਤ ਆ।
So Jagjit Singh is sharing that it is a great benefit, the digital age, because people have said that everyone has forgotten in 30 years and now they're starting to revisit this history. So yeah, it's something that is a very interesting question. I don't know if the other scholars want to comment, but it is helping. But just as this conference is highlighting, the rise of the extremist right-wing sort of genocide denial narrative is extremely prevalent as well. And obviously during the Civil War, people who were Hindus as well as Sikhs were killed, and a few Muslims and Christians. So what we're finding is that the Hindutva narrative highlights definitely the tragedy of 40 people killed by guerrillas on a bus, but they're adding up the numbers, and they seem to totally be trying to disappear the numbers in terms of the Sikhs who were killed. And it was mostly Sikhs who were killed at the hands of the state. And as we know, that's quite a powerful mechanism.
Thank you so much for those responses, and to hear how the new opportunities and chances that the digital age is providing, but also the challenges that it sort of also brings into that. We only have a couple of minutes left. We have one more question in the chat by Henry, which ties in nicely to what you were just saying, Simajit. He asked, could you comment on any political parties or groups in India today who might potentially influence national politics in a way to address this case and change the dynamic you're explaining now?
Paranjit is best placed to answer that, but
I would like to go first.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah. Actually, Henry, present regime is proactive, but basically the deep state of India has reached to the present current position. So the current regime is simply proactively, we can say, reflecting that position to which the state has already reached. But given the changing dynamics of politics and geopolitical fronts in South Asia, the chances are low, but there are some forces, political parties particularly, who are that are advocating federalism politics. So they are the only but very mild hope for change in this scenario. Otherwise, my understanding is that the state has reached to the point and current regime is simply reflecting that position.
So sorry, just to add in there, I wasn't sure if Henry was asking with respect to genocide denial, or with respect to India in general. But the Sikhs experienced this during various parties who ruled India, namely the Congress Party. Then the Gujarat massacres took place afterwards. Then we've had the rise of Hindutva under the BJP. So I think whichever political party comes into power, they make a promise that there will be investigations, but we've seen in 30 years, there's just been little will by the Indian state. And our biggest problem is that the forensics of crimes have been lost over 30 years. So if I just give you a last word, like, for instance, the whole of this research group has been looking at illegal mass cremations. So the mass cremations took place to get rid of evidence. Had these people been even in a burial site by now, we would have forensics to prove how people were killed. I'm probably the wrong person to answer this, but anyway, I don't think, from my point of view, that there's any political party who's had the will to carry through recognition of these sufferings, or the Gujarat massacres, or any massacres since, and the state of impunity, I think, in other regions of India as well.
Thank you very much for your responses to that, and thank you very much for the whole panel. We're now through with time, but it's been I've learned a lot today, and I'm sure the other people visiting the panel have as well, and hopefully others will as well with the recording, which I will actually stop now. Thank you very much.